The office clock ticked louder than her heartbeat as she rushed in, her shoes scuffed from the long bus ride, and her blouse slightly damp from running in the morning heat. She dropped her worn handbag by the side of her desk, whispering apologies under her breath. Before she could even catch her breath, his shadow fell across her cubicle. Mr. Harris, her boss. His face was already twisted in disdain. He slammed a folder onto her desk so hard the pens rattled. His voice cracked like a whip. "You're late again. Pack your things, you're fired." The young black woman froze, her heart pounding against her ribs. She opened her mouth, voice trembling, desperate to explain. "Please, Mr. Harris, the bus broke down, my son," but he cut her off with a sharp, cruel smirk. "Excuses. Always excuses. People like you never last here." His words pierced deeper than the firing itself. He hadn't just questioned her punctuality. He questioned her worth, her place in the world, her right to even stand where she stood. Around them, the office went silent, her co-workers staring but saying nothing, some averting their eyes. She blinked hard, forcing back the tears that threatened to spill. She would not cry in front of him. She would not give him that satisfaction. Without another word, she picked up her bag, stood tall, and walked out of the building. On the bus ride home, the city blurred past her window as her mind replayed his words over and over. "People like you never last here." Each repetition burned hotter inside her chest until fire humiliation turned into a flame of determination. That night, as her son slept soundly in their small apartment, she sat alone at the kitchen table. A single light bulb flickered above her as she stared at his school photo propped against the wall. His big brown eyes smiled at her with innocence, with hope. She whispered through gritted teeth, "I won't let this break me. I won't let him be right." The weeks that followed were brutal. She picked up night shifts at a diner, mornings at a call center, and still found hours to study. Textbooks piled high on the table, her laptop screen glowing through the night. She studied business management, finance, leadership. She devoured every lesson, every course, knowing that knowledge was her ladder out of the pit he had thrown her into. When exhaustion nearly broke her, she thought of her son, his backpack by the door, his soft voice asking, "Mom, are you okay?" And she would force a smile, kiss his forehead, and say, "I'm fine, baby. Mommy's just working on something big." Time marched on. Years passed, but she never let go of that fire. She applied for jobs and faced rejection after rejection, but instead of bowing her head, she used each one as fuel. She landed a job at another firm, not glamorous, but it was a start. She worked harder than anyone else in that building, volunteering for the projects no one wanted, staying late, learning how to lead without a title. Slowly, her reputation grew. Her name began to circulate in rooms she had never even entered. Whispers of her work ethic, her leadership, her brilliance began to spread beyond the walls of her department. One evening, she stood before the mirror, adjusting the lapels of her tailored navy blue pantsuit. Her reflection looked back at her. Not the weary woman who had once walked out in tears, but a leader forged in fire. She whispered to her reflection, steady and calm, "I'm ready." The day came sooner than anyone expected. The boardroom buzzed with chatter as employees filed into their seats. At the head of the table sat Mr. Harris, the same smug grin plastered on his face, basking in the sound of his own voice. He leaned back in his chair as though he owned the world. The double doors opened and the chatter died instantly. All eyes turned to the entrance. His smirk faltered. His jaw went slack. She walked into the room, her heels clicking against the polished floor. No longer in worn slacks, but in a perfectly cut navy blue suit, her shoulders squared, her presence commanding. She scanned the room with sharp, determined eyes before locking them on him. Calm, unshakable, powerful, she walked to the head of the table. "Good morning," she said evenly, her voice carrying authority. "As your new regional manager, let's talk about accountability." The room went silent. Mr. Harris sat frozen, color draining from his face. The same man who had once mocked her as unworthy now sat beneath her authority. His smirk collapsed into disbelief. His arrogance shattered in an instant. He tried to speak, fumbling over excuses. "Well, I've been running things this way for years. But she raised her hand slightly, and the room fell silent again. She didn't need to shout. Her presence alone silenced him. And that's exactly why things must change, she said, her gaze steady, her words sharp but calm. Every executive in the room nodded. Their attention was hers, their respect undeniable. The balance of power had shifted forever. Later that evening, she sat in her corner office, the one that once belonged to him. She looked out at the city skyline, her reflection in the glass no longer that of a woman dismissed, but a leader who had risen. She thought of her son, the countless nights she had stayed awake to study, the humiliation she had endured, and the promise she had made to herself, that she would not stay down. She had kept it, but there was still one final chapter left to close. The next morning, whispers filled the office halls. Everyone knew, everyone had seen. But what they didn't know was that she had requested Mr. Harris in her office. When he walked in, his steps were slower, hesitant. He no longer carried himself with arrogance. His shoulders were heavy, his forced smile tight and unconvincing. He cleared his throat nervously. Look, about what happened years ago. You have to understand, I was under pressure. I didn't mean... She leaned forward slightly, her calm voice slicing through his excuses. You told me people like me never last here. Do you remember that? He froze. His lips parted, but no words came out. His eyes darted around the room, looking for a lifeline that wasn't there. She continued, her tone steady but unrelenting. You were wrong. People like me don't just last, we rise. She slid a file across the desk. His hands shook as he opened it. His eyes scanned the paper, and his face drained of all color. She didn't need to raise her voice. The verdict was written in black and white. Corporate has reviewed your record. Too many complaints. Too much arrogance. Effective immediately, you're relieved of your position. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, but he said nothing. The man who once ended her career with a smirk now had his own ended by her signature. He turned on his heel and stormed out, but his silence spoke louder than any words. She sat back in her chair, closed her eyes for a moment. She didn't celebrate, didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Justice had already been served. That evening, she returned home to her small apartment, where her son was waiting by the door with his backpack. He ran to her with a wide smile. Mom, how was work? She smiled back, kneeling to his level. Work was good, baby. Work was very good. In that moment, she felt the weight of the journey she had carried for years lift off her shoulders. The struggles, the tears, the long nights, they had all led here. She hadn't just proved him wrong. She had proved herself right. And as she tucked her son into bed that night, she knew that every insult, every hardship, every late bus and weary day had been worth it, because she had shown him and herself that nothing and no one could stop her rise. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that matter. And let's keep the conversation going.